Good morning and welcome back to the Teacher Educator Conference 2015 in Hyderabad. I'm very pleased to be joined by Dr. Rama Mathew and David Hayes. Both of you welcome and thank you for taking time out to come and talk to us. You're going to be on a panel discussion later today talking about quality or evaluating quality in the Teacher Educator program. And I wanted to ask you a few questions about that, if that's okay. Obviously, as I said, the discussion looks at evaluating what works in teacher educator programs, and I was wondering if you could maybe summarise some of, summarise the evaluation process and some of your findings in terms of what you found to be successful. Rama.
Yeah, as far as my own work is concerned, I do a lot of in-service work with teachers. So lots of action research projects and something that can come broadly under CPD. And for me, what has worked is that these are usually or almost always volunteers, and therefore they are interested in doing something, asking questions about their own classrooms. It's highly sort of individualized, and it's at the same time there is something that's common across teachers, across different kinds of schools. So when teachers get together to talk about their work, they get a lot of motivation, and that's just sustainable. So they want to continue working beyond a kind of a project framework. And for me, that says that, okay, this is going well. And even now, maybe after 10 years, when I talk to those teachers, they are continuing in that kind of a teacher as researcher approach. So I think it's been that way very successful.
Okay. So it starts, I mean, there seems to be a recurring theme actually, that it sort of starts from the classroom, it starts from the teacher, and it's an individual. Okay.
Yeah, and it goes back to the classroom, and there is a lot of give and take, collaboration, and learning from each other. So they come together as a group, share. So that's been very, very satisfying for all of us, including me.
David, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with everything that you said. I've also done a lot of work on CPD programs, in-service programs. But what we also find is that looking at things more holistically is also important, because there tends to be this big division between what happens in pre-service and what happens in in-service, and I think that doesn't help, partly because the lecturers in the training colleges never get to spend enough time in school, and so they themselves not really up to date with the methodology that they talk about on their pre-service courses, but they don't actually implement in their own training colleges. So I would like to see much more integration between the two, so that we see in-service and pre-service as part of a continuum. It's all to do with these various stages of development of a teacher, and that's something which continues over the course of a teacher's entire career. It's a tricky thing to do, though, especially in systems where there is this big division between what happens in college and what happens in school, and one has higher status than the other. But really, I think we need to be thinking of education as a partnership at all levels, and then we can then begin to start thinking about monitoring and evaluation and building that in at, right from pre-service through to in-service. And so then, hopefully, the problems that Rukmini was talking about this morning won't be occurring in the future.
Yeah, I think Geeta Durarajan was also talking about this yesterday, with the idea of teacher educators perhaps not being in the classroom, or not, so the methodology isn't kind of based on their own practice often. So no, it's interesting. And I mean, what's nice is, I mean, the title of the discussion and what you're talking about is the evaluating what's successful, and it's nice, I think, to focus on those positive aspects. Conversely, perhaps, I mean, obviously with your research and with your findings, I imagine there have been things that have come up that perhaps you found don't work or have been unsuccessful. I just wondered if you could talk about that a little bit.
Whenever again about in-service work of teachers or CPD-related work. Whenever principals or head teachers have said, okay, I want 2 of these teachers to work on your project, or this is how it should be, there isn't that kind of inner urge to do something. It hasn't worked. Also, when the system doesn't support it beyond the brief of a project or the work, then I think teachers, then it hasn't worked. Teachers do need some acknowledgement, do need a kind of chance for sharing. Even this conference, for example, now some of our teachers have come and we had a presentation. Now that's given them an enormous boost, because many people came up to them and said, how did you do this work? Can we be part of this work? And can we also join this kind of thing? So now they're going to be there all together. So the network increases, expands, and then they keep going. There's one more thing about pre-service. I'm also in a Department of Education where we do B.Ed, which is a secondary teacher education program, which is just a 10-month course, which has been a 10-month course so far. And as you said, there's just no time for spending enough time in school or integrating theory and practice. First of all, should theory come first and then practice? I mean, all these questions are so tricky. So they're just going through a program, and then we are certifying them. Certifying them for what? Not definitely a potential good teacher, but then marks on very discrete elements which are nothing to do with what their work involves when they become teachers. So there is a total disjuncture between what happens in teacher education colleges and what happens in school. And now in this July, it's going to become a 2-year program in India. So it's a very big move, and I hope something drastic will happen by way of curriculum, by way of what we think about teacher, the theory practice link and so on. So I hope.
I remember one thing that they could do is to send the training college lecturers back to school for a little period of teaching. It happened once when I was working in Malaysia. Teachers in the training colleges, the lecturers, were told that they had to spend 1 term in school as a teacher. I think it was every 5 years, in order to make sure that they didn't lose their connections with classroom roots. And when they first introduced it, of course, all the college lecturers were very scared because they hadn't done it for so long. But if you don't go and sort of take every opportunity that you can to renew your connections with the classroom, then it's very difficult for you to be convincing when you're talking about what teachers should do and how they should teach. So you have to try somehow or other, you have to try to keep those connections with classroom teaching.
It's interesting. I mean, I think there does tend to be that idea that your status sort of rises and you become a trainer, and there's the feeling that, well, you don't need to kind of go backwards in any way or reflect, and it's very much about, well, I'm the expert, I'm the trainer now, so I don't. And you lose that connection, I think. So it's I mean, one of the things that I've found throughout the conference and the talks that I've been to is that there's a strong emphasis on teachers taking responsibility or being motivated to take responsibility for their own development, which I think, I mean, in practice most people would agree that that's a good idea. In theory, but sometimes the practice of encouraging that or doing that is a very difficult thing to do. I just wondered if you had any kind of ideas on how that can.
I think this is where ministries of education, state departments of education have a really important role to play, because those are the organisations which, if you like, provide the scope and the opportunities for teachers to develop. They have to find some way in which they can promote continuing professional development. So if they have a sort of a range of opportunities, and if like a menu, and teachers are, I suppose if they're required to take some kind of course every year, but they can choose what kind of course they want to take, and then that may help them to keep going. But I think most teachers, when they start teaching, their primary interest is in doing a good job. When they start, they're interested in teaching, most of them. They want to help their children to learn. But after a few years in school, then they lose their motivation. So I think that's often because they're not prompted to develop, they're not prompted to think about teaching. And we were talking also about space. The teachers need space in order, even if they could just sit down in their own schools and talk together, not about marks or tests or anything, but what works in the classroom, or what activities they themselves have tried which might be useful that somebody else could do. That would be important. But often they have so many lessons to teach, so many meetings to go to, so many books to mark. You just don't have this time for thought and reflection.
I also think that, as you said, there has to be some kind of a system where one can visualize growing along some, well-defined stages. The British Council CPD thing I really like, and I don't know if different states in the country are picking that up and then making it part of their recruitment system. Because I can't imagine a teacher joins when she's 25 or whatever, and then at 55 she's just a teacher. If at all, she can become a head teacher, which is all admin work, but there's nothing at all in terms of motivation, incentive. So it has to be incentivized.
That does it at every level,
Yes, there should be some kind of, if you like, grades of teacher.
That's right.
Obviously, when you first graduate, one hopes that you're a competent teacher. But then, over the course of years, you ought to become more expert.
That's right.
Okay, you're not necessarily having more qualifications, but you become a better teacher.
That's right.
And if there was some kind of way in which that was assessed, and that led to salary increases, then that would be an incentive for teachers to keep going.
It's almost kind of about or being aware of when those kind of dips in motivation happen, at what kind of stage in the career that happens, and being aware of that almost, and having something in place that avoids that happening, or as you say, incentivizes teachers to kind of be motivated. Anyway. Okay, well, I'll let you get on. I know you're about to go into a talk, so you're busy as well, I know. But thank you very much for taking the time to come and talk to us, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.